Hey everybody, this is Steven from PopCultureMaven.com. We're back with this week's new comic book reviews, and yes, another huge freaking week, so let's just get right to it. First up, we have Robin and Batman number one, written by Jeff Lemire and Dustin Nguyen. So what this story is, it really has to do with the beginning of Dick becoming Robin and how he is kind of dealing with it. So think of him, he's not a teenager yet and he's not quite Robin. He's a very young Robin, but not a kid. And that's what's really interesting that Lemire brings to this story is that he's still very green. He wants to become Robin, but Bruce is obviously kind of not keen on he is not ready yet, but he thinks he's ready. And that's really what a lot of this story is. But it's also a great story about the relationship of Bruce and Dick. And it's really interesting. And I love how Lemire brings brings an interesting take on this story because this story has been told a number of times, but I think what Lemire is doing here is the way he's telling it is kind of a much younger aspect than it really has been told before. And it just brings an interesting twist to it. And it's really interesting. And I think the thing is what Lemire does so well, he's actually writing a story about Dick and Bruce, not Robin and Batman per se. And that is what really makes this is he's really getting into the deep parts of the characters themselves, which is really a smart move, and I think that's why this story works so well. Then, of course, you have Dustin Nguyen's artwork. He's doing his watercolor artwork, which is just absolutely gorgeous. And I also love the way that he draws Dick because he's very young, but he's not a kid, so that's really hard to pull off. And I think Nguyen does it really, really well here. And he's an amazing artist, and I think I love how Lemire definitely wrote the story with him doing the artwork in mind. This is a big win this week. This is really highly recommended. Next up we have Venom number one, written by Al Ewing and Ram V, with artwork by pencils by Brian Hitch and artwork inks by Andrew Curry. So here's the problem that I have with this. This is not a bad book. The problem is if you haven't been reading Venom or you didn't read The King in Black, you're going to be pretty much lost here. Now there is a thing at the beginning that kind of tells you, okay, here's Eddie, here's his son, this is this and this is that. But ultimately, unless you've been reading that, this does start a new story with Eddie and his son. But the problem comes down to is there's a whole history that goes with this that I have no clue of what's going on. And I really get frustrated a lot when there is these first issues like this because I have no clue. I don't have a backstory, so I can't really relate to these characters doing such and such. Like Eddie's out in space. Okay, great. How does he stay out in space? I don't know. And he controls like these other like Venom clones or whatever. Once again, not bad, but I have no clue of what's going on. Now for regular readers of Venom or in King of Black, they're going to be fine, but if you're looking to start Venom, I don't know that this is a really good starting point because I understood the story, but I didn't understand all the history that goes to this story. That's where I had the problem. I will say Ewing and Ram V, the script is nice and it's decent, but there's just that problem with the history. Brian Hitch, his artwork's really gorgeous. It's a great looking book. But once again, I can't really recommend it to new readers because it's just not new reader friendly. Next up, we have My Date with Monsters number one, written by Paul Tobin with artwork by Andy McDonald. So what this is there was a husband and wife team that were scientists, and they discovered they were working on people's nightmares and stuff, and something goes wrong, and they end up releasing they basically break the wall between nightmares and reality, where now nightmares can come to monsters can come out and attack you and everything. So what they had to do is they developed a drug that suppresses nightmares. except for his there's still people who have nightmares. They forget to take the medicine, or they don't take the medicine on purpose. So there's kind of that whole thing going on. There's that. So in a way, it's kind of like a nightmare pandemic possible if, you know, people are not taking the medicine. But the main part of the story is that the wife the husband has passed, and she's dating. Well, we all know how dating, it never goes well. So what it is she ends up going to the bathroom, and there's this demon that comes out, or monster, nightmare, whatever you want to call it. And she has like a really good friend who is a monster who eats them. So really what the relationship is they have like a great friendship, and he really hangs around because her daughter has nightmares, so he basically sits in the room and eats the nightmares when they come in. And she kind of asks, well, why don't you love each other? And he goes, well, love's not that easy. So it's really interesting. So you kind of have the monsters, you have this relationship, you have her dating. There's a lot going on here. In a way, this first issue was a tad messy, in the sense of there was kind of a lot going on. There's a lot of exposition that Tobin is getting through. And it was a little disjointed a little bit, not horribly, but I think he almost maybe put a little too much in this first issue, but I don't think it was fatal. It was just a little noticeable. I did like McDonald's art, does a nice job, draws nice demons and everything. This one's kind of a marginal recommendation. I think there's some good ideas here. I don't know that this first issue really came off as well as I would have liked, but I don't think it was terrible. I think it shows promise, so it'll be interesting. I'd give the second issue a swing. Next up, we have Regarding the Matter of Oswald's Body, number 1, written by Christopher Cantwell, with artwork by Lucia Casalegudea. So what this is, it starts off in the present. They're exhuming Lee Harvey Oswald's body, because they're going to do some DNA testing. And then we go back to the 60s, pre-John F. K. assassination, where this mysterious sort of agent is getting people that do certain things. Like there's a person that is a really good shooter. There's a person that is able to do different things. So he's getting this group together. My take on this, and it's not explained in the first issue, my personal take is that he's getting a group together to assassinate JFK. That seems to be the setup. Now, that is not spelled out per se in this first issue, but that's my thought of what the story is. And that is kind of, I will say, one of the bit of the problems with the story is that he does all this setup, but there's not really a cohesiveness to the setup as well as I would have liked. I don't think it's necessarily terrible. I just think the Cantwell, and I've seen this with his other books, he a lot of times they often start off pretty rough, and this one is not as rough as some, but it still kind of has that lingering over it a little bit, and it kind of suffers from it. I think there's some interesting ideas, but it was just, like I said, it was a little bit off and a little bit too convoluted to really recommend. Although Consulate Guda's artwork's actually nice, does a nice job here with what they have to work with, but it's I think the concept is really good. I just don't think the execution was as well done as I would have liked. Next up, we have Phenom X number 1, written by John Leguizamo, Adam Rappaport, Joe Makayak, and Damon Slattery, with artwork by Chris Batista. Now, this is yet another actor that wants to write comics and create a superhero book, which is all great and everything. Unfortunately, this book is not very good. In fact, it's quite terrible, I'd say. Part of it is there's so many cliches. Like every page, it's like they smack you in the face. That every page has a cliche. There's superhero cliches. There's the setup of, oh, he's an innocent man, but he's in jail, but he's angry. And then, so to become a superhero, this government agency is developing this pill that gives you superpowers, but you have to have a certain amount of radiation, and you have to have a certain ethnicity. And in this case, you have to be of a Latin descent. And then on top of that, I found that after a while, to me, the book kind of was insulting because not only was there cliches, but there were just these ethnic tropes that were just, I personally found to just be really insulting. They were just they were just like cliches of people and ethnicities and the way people talk and stuff. This was not a good book. It was really just sad after a while because it was just like, it was a chore to read because you just kept going on and you're just like, this is stupid and that's not good. I mean, the only thing that was actually a plus about this was not the story. It was Batista's artwork, which is actually quite nice. It's a really nice looking book. But it's sad because the story's terrible, and then it just goes on, and then it just, like I said, I found it insulting. That's just me. I don't know. Maybe there are going to be people that like it. Not me. I just thought it was not very good, and I would avoid it this week. It's just not good. Next up, we have The Thing Number One, written by Walter Mosley with artwork by Tom Riley. Now, Walter Mosley is a novelist, so I always find it interesting when a novelist goes to write comics, because they know how to write a novel, but do they know how to write a comic? Well, I will give Mosley that he actually, I would say he's about 90%. Like, there were a few times where it was a little time jumpy, where it was, you'd turn the page and it felt like there was a bit of a jump in the story. Not that it was confusing or anything. It felt like you kind of jumped a little bit, and it was a little bit odd. But not fatal. On the plus side, the story is really interesting. I think Ben Grimm is a really interesting character. I think he's the most interesting of the Fantastic Four characters because of he's a rock creature, and he doesn't blend into society well at all. And he's just a really cool character. I think he's a really interesting character. And Mosley actually gets all this, and that's why this book starts off so well. It really does, even with a couple of the pacing issues, I would say. Riley's artwork is really, really nice. Has a really clean, kind of cartoony style, but it really fits the story really well. And I think he does a really nice job of bringing the emotions of Ben to life in the artwork, which is really important in this particular story, because it's not about him being a superhero. It's about Ben Grimm, and that's I think one of the reasons why the story works so well. So it's really, really interesting, and I really enjoyed it. I think it's well worth checking out. Next up, we have What's the Furthest Place from Here, number 1, written by Tyler Boss with artwork by Matthew Rosenberg. Now, I'm a huge Tyler Boss fan. His last Dead Dog Bites was a really, really good miniseries, and there is a hardcover of it out. If you didn't pick it up, it's really, really good. This is really interesting because, now, I will forewarn you, yes, it's a post-apocalyptic world. Aren't they all at this point? But what's interesting is, so you have these different gangs and stuff, but the first gang we get to know, they live in a record store. And so there's that element, kind of a musical element to the story, which is, I think, quite interesting. So what it is they're living in their, kind of their house and everything, and then all of a sudden this guy shows up. He's been shot or stabbed, he's bleeding to death, and he asks for asylum. And there's another gang, this pig gang, they wear pig masks, and they say, hey, he's ours, or whatever, give him back to us. And they say no. So, and there's also the whole thing, it seems to be like kind of a Logan's Run thing, where there's no really adults. When you hit a certain age, I guess you die or get killed or whatever. That's not really explained, but it's, like I said, the Logan's Run thing is the best way to kind of set that up, or to explain that. So that opens so there's that part of the story, which we kind of don't know what's going on with that. But we also, I think Boss does really well is here. He really sets this world up really nicely. But really the big thing is how he sets up the characters and how this world kind of works, and how they're kind of dealing with this whole thing and dealing with humanity and not becoming like savages. I guess that's kind of one thing that there's a sense of right and wrong and good and taking care of people. And that's really, I think, really what I liked about the story. Rosenberg's artwork's really, really nice here. He really does a nice job because there's a lot of, most of it's people standing around talking, and you got to be able to pull that off and make it convincing. And he does a nice job here. I really like this book. It really sets off. It's also a story that washes over you, that there are definitely still a lot of questions we have that we don't have a lot of answers to, but it wasn't like I felt lost or anything like that. So I really did enjoy it. Next up, we have A Righteous Thirst for Vengeance, number 2, written by Rick Remender with artwork by Andre Lima Arjejo. So I really enjoyed the first issue. The first issue really, it was one of those almost silent stories because there was very little dialogue. And the second issue does pretty much continue at that. Now there is a bit more dialogue. He goes and visits his mother. So what we kind of learn now is that you can earn money by murdering people, and that when you take the job, the police will quote unquote not show up. That for some reason these people have been marked for murder. So we now find out that this guy is, in the second issue, he takes a job. So we don't know, he stumbled across another job in the first issue that led to this, him doing this possibly. So there's still a lot of questions about like how this all works and everything. But I think what's interesting is that even though we're not quite sure who he is and how he really fits into this whole thing and how this murder element works, that you're really intrigued with the story. And I find that really interesting. And I really have to give a Remender, because there are times where he can over dialogue, I feel, a story. In this case, he's really pulled back the reins and just really told the story through the artwork. It's really, and that's where Arejo's artwork really comes in. It's a really gorgeous looking book. This is really a wonderful book, and I really enjoyed the second issue, and I'm intrigued to see where they take it after this second issue. So, next up, we have Batman the Imposter number 2, written by Madison Tomlin, with artwork by Andrea Sorrentino. Now, I really enjoyed the first issue. The setup here is that Batman is out on one of his nights. He stumbles into this psychiatrist's office. She makes a deal with him that as long as he continues to come in and talk to her, that she won't tell the police that he's Bruce Wayne. So the other part of the story is that there's somebody else portraying Batman, and they're actually killing bad guys. They're killing people who, they're criminals. But but the problem is, it's making him look like a vigilante in the eyes of the public, to where he's not a vigilante, he's a hero. So there's really, what's interesting about this story, and what I really like that Tomlin is doing, it's really psychological story. I mean, there's the element of, him being Batman, that's fine. But it's also, there's not only a psychological, but this is fairly early in his career as Batman. So it plays into that, where he hasn't really, he's Batman, but he's kind of not quite good. He's not quite that good at it yet in some respects. He kind of gets his ass kicked quite a bit. And that brings up a really interesting thing, because he's still trying to find his way as Batman. But I also love how Tomlin is telling this story. It's really a lot about Bruce Wayne, about how they're separate. They are like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in some respects, but they also interweave with each other. So there's that element that he really captures in this story. And then you have Sorrentino's artwork. I'm a huge fan. I love his artwork. His Gideon Falls was amazing. If you haven't checked that out, really check that out. He's a brilliant artist, and he brings so much life and grit to this story that's just really wonderful. And this is a really, really good story. I'm really, really enjoying it, and really recommend it. Next up, we have Superman versus Lobo number 2, written by Tom Seeley and Sarah Beatty, with artwork by Mirka and Dolfo. So once again, I have to say, and I said it for the first issue, I can't believe they're letting Seeley and Beatty do this story, because this is just batshit crazy stuff. I so what it is, so from the first issue, so now we have this entity has recreated Krypton and Lobo's planet, which have been destroyed, and they have switched places. So Lobo's on Krypton and Superman's on Lobo's planet. And so you have this dichotomy. First of all, you have like Krypton, science and everybody's, but you find out that there's this weird flower child sort of like group of people on Krypton. And of course, Lobo's like, hey, I'm going to go hang out with them because they're drinking beer and stuff. So there's that. And then Superman is on Lobo's planet, and he finds out that everybody there is really nice and not like Lobo. Like he's the asshole and everybody else is nice. Of course, he's the one that destroyed their planet and killed them all, so maybe they probably don't like him very much. But so Superman doesn't, because of the Red Sun, we think that he doesn't have his powers. So he's kind of living a normal life, and so there's that. And then also, without really giving too much away, because there's just a lot going on, and I will show this, that basically Lobo becomes like a flower child. It's just, I think that single panel alone just really sums up like how insane Seeley and Beatty are taking the story. That it's gone off the rails, but like in a good way. It's totally off the rails, but it's nuts and crazy, but it works. I don't know why, I don't know how, but it's working. And then you have Andolfo's artwork, and she really brings it, because I love how there's times where she brings the cartoony style a little bit, but then she also knows when to play it and when to play it a little more straight superhero-ish. And she really, and also the fact that she's able to capture all the insanity in the script is just absolutely amazing, because I can imagine that this book has been not an easy task to draw because of all the insanity that's going on. So once again, this is a wild book, and I love, they've captured Lobo quite well, and I can't wait to see after the events in this issue. I can't wait to see where they take it after this. Next up, we have Harley Quinn, the Eat Bang Kill Tour #3, written by T. Franklin with artwork by Max Sarin. So this continues telling stories from the Harley Quinn animated series on HBO Max. And it takes place after the finale of the second season, where Poison Ivy was left on the altar by Kite Man. And so this is a Hope and Crosby Road picture with Harley and Ivy, that they're being chased by Hush, Commissioner Gordon, and Nightwing, and then we have Nightwing's abs and his butt. I won't explain that, you just have to read it, but there's a whole, the Nightwing thing is really hilarious. This is really fun. I have to really admit, Franklin not only has captured the feel and style of the animated series, I think in a lot of ways she's actually built on it really quite nicely in the story, because with a comic, she really is allowed to like flesh out and really tell not just the main stories, but kind of a lot more of the in-between stuff that you don't necessarily have time to do in a television show. And I really have to give it to her that she's really pulling it off really well here. And it really not only captures the animated series, but in some ways I think she's actually topped it a little bit. I really have to give it to her. And then you have Saren's artwork, which is just, it's gorgeous. And I love his facial expressions are absolutely priceless. He has a great animation type style that is so perfect for this book, and it really is just a treat to read. It's really a lot of fun, and I can't wait to see more and more of it. Next up, we have Mazebook #3, written and drawn by Jeff Lemire. So the father has discovered that his daughter may still be alive, and that in a way, because she solves mazes, that the maze may actually be a key to finding her. It's kind of like a puzzle, and he's put the pieces of the puzzle together. So now he is trying to find her, and he comes along the way to this woman who he's able to tell his story to, and it's interesting because he's able to, like, am I crazy? And she's like, well, yeah, but maybe not. And so that, I think, is really good pivotal part of the story that Lemire is telling here, is that it's not just him kind of in his head, like, am I crazy and stuff. I mean, he talked to his wife thinks he's crazy. That's probably why they got divorced. And but now that he is able to kind of ground, like, okay, yeah, this is crazy, but it may not be. And also discovering that the maze itself is the city. The city is the maze that she has left him. And I really don't want to give any more away because the ending is really spectacular in this issue. I really love this. I love when Lemire not only writes and draws his own stuff, because there's a reason. This is a very personal type story, in the sense of I love how the story washes over you, and it just unfolds in a really natural way. And the way he does the artwork on this is absolutely amazing. Not only with his style, which is absolutely perfect for the story, but his use of color is absolutely amazing. And it's so important to the story. And I know that his style is not to everybody's liking, but you really need to give it a chance, because this is really just a beautiful book that is just so amazingly good that you really need to check it out. Next up, we have Deadpool Black, White, and Blood number 4, and this issue has 3 stories. We have the first one written by Christopher Yost with artwork by Martin Chicolo. Then we have the next story by Senshiro Kasama writing, and Makiru Usagi as the artist, and then the last story is written and drawn by Michael Allred. So the first one, the Yost one's really a lot of fun, and without giving too much away, I'll give away a little bit, but all I got to say is it's Deadpool, and there's another character that says, "Oh yeah." So if you figure that out, that's where they go, and it's really perfect. The next one is a very manga influenced story, and they actually kind of not make fun of manga, but they bring up the manga style, and they really have a lot of fun playing with that. But for me, the final story by Mike Allred's the big win, because not only does it have Deadpool, but he brings back a bit of ecstatic that is really interesting. And it also remember that he is kind of from the X-Men universe, so it's kind of nice that there's this little nod and wink back to that he is a mutant. And so once again, these are great, fun, standalone stories. You don't have to read the previous issue or anything. They stand on their own. This one's another big win. Once again, for me, the Allred was just like, shut up and take my money, because I love Mike Allred. But I still think they're worth checking out. And I love how you have these different people doing Deadpool, Next up, we have The Unbelievable Unteens number 4, written by Jeff Lemire with artwork by Tyler Crook. So this is the final issue. And what I have loved about the story, and I really, as always, I'm a huge fan of the Black Hammer universe, is that what this story has been about is, and most of the Black Hammer stories, they're not necessarily about superheroes and that kind of thing. That's a part of it. But it's really about the characters and how they deal with like life and being superheroes and not. And this one's been very interesting, because what it is so you basically had these kids that became they were superheroes, and then as they got older, they forgot that they were superheroes. And the story is them getting back to not necessarily becoming superheroes, but becoming a family again. And that's really what this story has been about. And it's actually been quite touching. And I, once again, that's what I love about Lemire when he writes these side stories from the Black Hammer universe, that really is about characters and that's so important to doing a good story. And he just does it so well. And then you have Crook's artwork, which is just absolutely gorgeous. He's really captured this so well. And this one is full on Crook artwork. There's not the comic book style, which was really great for the first issue, but this one really it wraps up this story so well. It was wonderful. If you haven't read it, check and see if your comic shop has this book. All 4 issues. It's really good. If not, there's going to be a trade. I can't recommend anything from the Black Hammer universe enough. These are really wonderful stories. And like I said, like this story, you don't have to read any other Black Hammer. You can totally read this on its own, and it works so well. Another highly recommended book. Next up, we have Mamo number 5, written and drawn by Saz Millage. Now, I've just really described this as kind of somewhat like Kiki's Delivery Service, but think of like Kiki's Delivery Service, but with two characters, the witch and then this girl, who are together trying to basically remove the curse from the town that the grandmother witch has unleashed on the town. So her granddaughter and the girl have been basically trying to break the spell. And so that is what this story has led up to. But what really is interesting is there's all the fantasy element stuff, but really when it comes down to it, it's really been about the relationship of these two girls. And this issue is just really wonderful. I don't want to give much away with the story, but it really it's a beautiful ending, and it really it's what we find out, and we've kind of known this for a while. It's a really great love story, and it's really just really wonderful. I've been a huge fan of this. Not only is the story great, but the artwork, Millage's artwork, is absolutely gorgeous. It's a stunning looking book. If you've missed this, pick up the trade, especially if you have kids. This is really a wonderful, great all ages book that really needs to be seen. It really, I highly recommend this book. Really check this out. Next up, we have the 6 Sidekicks of Trigger Keaton, number 6, written by Kyle Starks with artwork by Chris Schweitzer. So yes, we finally find out who killed Trigger Keaton. And what's interesting is, and I love the fact that right at the beginning of this issue, we find out who did it. But in a lot of ways, that hasn't been really the story. The story has been about these 6 people that have become like this family, because of Trigger. He treated them all like crap and everything. And yet, because of his death, they've all come together to solve his murder, but they've also become very close to each other, even though they're all totally different. And that's what's really been interesting about this story, is that really has been the murder mystery is the thread that holds it all together. But really, when all's said and done, it's about these characters coming together, and it's really been interesting. I really have to give Starks that this has been a really wonderful story with just a lot of great emotions and some of the best fight scenes I've ever seen in a comic, because they've been just like so batshit crazy. And Schweitzer has been able to visually pull this whole thing off, which is, I really have to hand it. There's been a lot of stuff that he's had to draw in this book. There's a ton, and it's really dense. It's really dense in a lot of ways, especially visually. And Schweitzer has pulled it off just perfectly. This has been a really great book. If you've missed it, the trade's going to come out next year. I really recommend it. This has been a really fun book and really well worth picking up. Next up, we have Wonder Woman 781, written by Michael W. Conrad and Becky Cloonan, with artwork by Marcio Takara. Now, this is a great jumping on point for Wonder Woman, and so this really starts the path of Diana coming back. And I think what's interesting with the Conrad and Cloonan are doing here is that they're doing what good writers should do. You don't need to write about Wonder Woman. We know about Wonder Woman. Write about Diana, and that's what we're seeing here. And that's really what they've been doing all along. Is it's been Diana's journey, her journey from death back to life, and now she's coming back to a world where, she's been gone for so long. And she not only has to, in a way, find her footing in that, but she has to find the footing in herself. And so there's still threads from the storylines, and once again, I don't think you're going to be too lost if you're a new reader, because once again, Clunan and Conrad give you enough information that like you understand. You may not get everything, but at least you won't feel lost. And they've done a nice job of also capturing like Etta and Steve Trevor, and how that going forward, how the ramifications are dealing with Diana and her struggles with coming back. And I love that that Boston Brand Deadman comes back, and I like that he's part of the story. So it's really interesting. Now we have a new artist, Takara, taking over the book, and does a nice job. I will say there was a few times where I felt the backgrounds were a little bit on the light side. I'm a stickler for like colors, not a background. But overall, I think the artwork's nice, does a good job, captures Diana really nicely. And it's really interesting. Now, there is a backup story, the road to the trial of the Amazons, which is, there's going to be a big Wonder Woman crossover story coming up with the Amazons and her, that's coming out next year. So this is kind of a setup story. So it's written by Vita Ilea with artwork by Skylar Partridge. So it's a first chapter, so it's really hard to tell. It's a nice first chapter, but it's going to take a couple or three chapters because there's only like 8-10 pages. So it starts off fairly decent, but it's going to take, like I said, a couple three to kind of see how it kind of fits in and how it feels. So we'll see where that goes. The story's decent, once again, for like a first chapter. The artwork's nice. So we'll see where it goes. I think it does fit in better than the Young Diana story, which, don't get me wrong, I really enjoy it. And that story is going to come out in a collected comic. So if you have younger readers, that was really good. But I think this fits a little bit better. And finally, we have Batman Scooby-Doo Mysteries number 8, written by Ivan Cohen, with artwork by Dario Brazula. Once again, I'm just going to say it. I love this book. It's Batman Scooby-Doo. What more could you ask for? Cohen writes a fun story. We have Joker and Harley in this, and an amusement park. You can't go wrong with that story. Brazula does a really nice job, brings a great animation style. This is just a fun book. They're great standalone stories, great for kids. Look, I'm a kid at heart. I love Scooby-Doo. I love Batman. They're great. And I love that Cohen writes it. He writes it so young kids can get it. But there's a real charm and joy for us that grew up with either Batman the Animated Series or Scooby-Doo. And it's just, it's great. You get to read it. The kids get to read it. It's a total win. And Brazella, once again, his artwork's just really wonderful. That's going to do it this week. A lot of books. We tried to get through them as quick as possible so I don't lose you towards the end. As always, public service announcement. I get all my books at Pulp Fiction Comics in Long Beach, California. Ryan and Annie and Eduardo are great. Ryan runs a great store there. He has a great pull service. They offer 30% off of trades and graphic novels. There's a sister store run by Chris and her team, Pulp Fiction Culver City, in Culver City. They're the same name, but separate owners. And if you live in the LA area, check it out. They also have great pull service, and they offer also 30% discounts on their trades and graphic novels. And as always, please be safe out there. Get vaccinated. Get booster shots if you're available. Please continue to stay healthy, mask up, social distance. And as we always end every show, please be kind. Kindness goes a long way. Things are really tough out there on many different levels. And being kind, it doesn't cost anything. And it's just, it can make somebody else's day, and honestly, it'll make you feel better. So please be kind to each other. So thanks for watching. Please like, share, subscribe to our YouTube channel. And that's going to do it this week. So we'll be back next week with new comic book reviews. This is Steven from Pop Culture Maven signing out. Take care of yourselves and be kind. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.